All right, we're on Unit 2, Age of Reformation. I'm very late. I'm very behind. I lost hope and I was about to give up, but um, I didn't really want to. I don't want to take the AP exam either, but it's 45 minutes. There's nothing to lose, so let's just get started. So Age of Reformation, I have some causes, and it's not a lot, it's just two. And the first one's going to be Renaissance humanism. And it's, the Renaissance was right before this. And so people are going to be still with the Renaissance mindset and way of thinking. And what this is going to do is going to make them question religious practices and authority. There's just going to be a deeper digging into why the church does certain things, why people follow the church, and just stuff like that. And the next is going to be the printing press. And this is super important, especially in my opinion. I think the printing press plays a huge role in almost, if not all, parts of history. And in this case, it's going to be because of how many copies of the Bible they publish and print. And it's going to give people access to the Bible. Everyone's going to have access to the Bible. They're going to be able to interpret it for themselves. And that's going to have an effect on the importance of the church. And we're going to see that a bit later on. Okay, next we have some foreshadowing of the religious Reformation. The first one is going to be the poor performance by the clergy during the plague. And this is like in the point of view from the public. Yeah. And so what this means is, during the plague, people, it's a very bad time, quite like right now we have the quarantine. But basically, people are going to be distressed and they're going to be searching for faith and hope and support from the church. But being the time of the plague, the church was not able to really do that and provide that service because members of the church, they didn't want to get infected, they didn't want to be sick, so they couldn't provide that sort of service to the public. And that made people see kind of the human side of the church. And what this is going to lead to is anti-clericalism. And what anti-clericalism is, just people are just going to lose respect for the church, and they're just not going to see it as important anymore. And next we have pietism, and that's really just going to be the development of individual relationship with God. And again, it's going to make people see church as less important and necessary. Thirdly, we have the Great Schism, and that was a very confusing time for really everyone because there were three popes, and each one of them were just excommunicating one another, and so no one had any idea what was going on, who was the actual pope. And so there was a lot of confusion. Wasn't good. Next, we have poorly educated clergy. Now, this one is important because it was just more highlighted because of the printing press. Like I said, everyone had access to the Bible, so they were able to read it, for themselves and interpret it for themselves. Well, when you read the Bible and you go to church and, what you're being told by the clergy doesn't match up with what you read or what you interpreted, well, that's just going to show how poorly educated the clergy who's supposed to be teaching you are. And so this led to, public criticism. And we're going to see more of that later. In addition to simony, I think is how you pronounce it. And that's really just the selling of church offices. And that plus the selling of indulgences, that's really going to piss people off. And it's going to make people accuse the church of being corrupt and secular in ways that it shouldn't be. And, we're going to have increased public criticism. And some examples are the Canterbury Tales. I think I pronounced that right. I don't know. And that's really just the satirical criticism on unqualified clergy, like I said. And next we have John Wycliffe. And he questioned the church's wealth. And really he was kind of accusing the church of being like a bit corrupted, and he really encouraged everyone to read the Bible and interpret it for themselves. Next we have Jen Hughes. I think I pronounced it right, but he basically held the belief that the Bible held authority over the church, and for this belief he was burned at the stake. All right, next we have Martin Luther, the man of the whole era. Everyone knows him, and he's going to be most well known for his 95 Theses. And basically, it started out as a response to the church's selling of indulgences. He just didn't like that. He did not see any point in that. And his logic was really, if the Pope had control of forgiving like certain people's sins, then why wouldn't he just forgive everyone for their sins and let them into heaven and just be cool with it? But that was his logic. And the 95 Theses really spread because of the printing press. Like I said, it spread like fire, and so everyone like read it and saw what it was about, and it's gonna gain him a following, a bunch of clout. And his main belief was that one was saved by faith and faith only. You didn't need the church, period. That was it. He's important. Martin Luther is very important because he, in my opinion, was the pioneer for the Reformation. And it was because, well, not necessarily like a direct cause, but he was definitely a strong contributor to the development of other reformational movements. And we'll talk about those later too. But he gained a lot of following, so people are hearing about him all over, and this is gonna result in his excommunication from the church. And then later on, he's gonna have to go in front of the Diet of Worms because he's gonna grab the attention of Charles V, who, if you didn't know, was the Holy Roman Emperor. And Charles V presided over the Diet of Worms, where they asked him to take back what he said about everything, about being saved by faith and faith only, about the 95 Theses, about all his criticisms about the church. But Martin Luther said, no, he won't take it back. And so they declared him as an outlaw of the empire. But basically, they banned him, but he was protected by Elector of Saxony, who was a prince of the German state. He formed his own church while in hiding, and he kind of narrowed down the 7 sacraments to only 2, including baptism and communion. And he rejected transubstantiation, which, if you didn't know, is really just the wine and the bread being Jesus's flesh and blood. And his reason for rejecting this was just, he believed that God was already present in the sacraments, so he didn't see a need for transubstantiation. He got married with a former nun, and he had many children. That's just it on Martin Luther, but his impact was definitely great. We're going to see that here. So some reasons for the success, the Protestant Reformation success. Obviously, the printing press, I'm not going to go over it. I just said it. It made everything spread like fire. Information went all over. Everyone knew what was going on. Next, especially Lutheranism. It was very socially conservative, meaning that it didn't really threaten social life. And so it was very chilled. It was very laid back. People didn't really have a problem with it. But there was a German peasant revolt, which it was peasants who were very upset with their economic state in society. They revolted, quoting Luther, and to justify their actions. But Luther openly disagreed, and he stated that the peasants should be put down, the revolt should be put down, and they should be punished. Next, Luther worked with German princes and subordinated to their authority, which really just allowed his religion, I guess, his Lutheranism, to coexist within the state, between state and church. So yeah, the princes didn't really have an issue with that. Next, I think this one is a pretty good point. I think this part is definitely something you might want to use in an essay, especially when you're talking about cause and effect. So political issues in the Holy Roman Empire allowed room for religious instability because Charles V was all over the place. He had to maintain this area, this other area, all these states. So he was very, he had a lot on his plate. So he couldn't control everything that was going on. He couldn't control the German revolt either. So that basically left room for people to have conflict over religion within the state, because he wasn't going to address it. He wasn't going to make a big deal about it because he had other things to worry about. So that was one thing that contributed to the success of the Reformation. And another thing before that is that additionally there was turmoil over who would be the Holy Roman Emperor. So again, a lot of political instability left room for religious instability. Next, we're going to have Schmalkaldic War. I'm not going to say that again. But really, the war was just Charles versus the Protestant princes. And basically, he had to agree to the Peace of Augsburg. He had to agree because, like I said, he was all over the place. He just didn't have time. He had to agree to Peace of Augsburg, and which was basically this agreement that the religion of the ruler would decide the religion of the whole state. So, for example, if let's use America, Donald Trump was Jewish, then the whole United States of America would be Jewish. That was really just the whole premise of Peace of Augsburg. All right, next. So many religious sectors formed as a result of the Reformation, and some of them are Anabaptists, Zwingli, and Calvinism. Well, Zwingli is not like the name, but it's just the name of the person. But okay, let's start with Anabaptists. So Anabaptists denied infant baptism because they believed that it only made sense and it only worked when someone was an adult and they got baptized. But neither the Pope or Luther supported this. So they legalized rebaptism, which was very anti-Anabaptism. People didn't like the Anabaptists. Next, we have Zwingli. So he accused the monks of corruption and questioned the effectiveness and the point of excommunication. He didn't really see what it did. He felt like it had no power. He mostly championed social reform. And, unlike Luther, he denied sacraments. Also denied transubstantiation. He felt that the Holy Communion was only a memorial of Christ's death. All right, Calvin, we have John Calvin, and basically his main belief was the idea of predestination. What this means is that, some from birth were already chosen to be given grace, and some were just gonna sin, and they were just gonna have a rough. So as a result of that, there was absolutely no free will. But he did push for people to live correctly in earthly matters. So, like, don't steal, don't lie, just live the best you can. So we have some terms. Huguenots are going to be French Calvinists, and Puritans are going to be English Calvinists. This is going to be important when College Board wants to use like specific terms and you get confused. So that's why I put that there. Okay, next we have English Reformation, possibly my favorite because I think Henry VIII was like the biggest simp for this. But so the English Reformation is also going to be known as the King's Great Matter. So basically, Henry VIII wanted to divorce Catherine d'Aragon because she was not giving birth to any boys, and he really blamed her for that. Him being a man of his time, blamed his wife. I don't know why men are like that, but he did. So he wanted to divorce her, but the church did not believe in divorce. The church would not allow divorce. So there was that. But he fell in love with Anne Boleyn, and he wanted her to sleep with him, but she said no sleeping together unless he made her queen, which is a good point. Yeah, it's also one of my favorite parts. I thought that was funny. So as a response, he wanted to, I guess, kind of go over the church. So he formed this Reformation Parliament, and what that did is it gave the king authority on really just anything relating to religion. And then after that, he bribed Anne Boleyn to sleep with him, which worked. So yeah, and she got pregnant as a result, and then he enacted this act and restraint of appeals, and this gave the king spiritual authority. Basically, kind of the same thing as the Reformation Parliament, but this was like an act, so it made it like a bit more official and it pushed it even more. And he got married to Anne Boleyn through an archbishop. I just fucked that up, didn't I? Okay, but anyways, he got married through this. I'm not gonna say it. I don't. This is embarrassing. I can't pronounce it. But so through the person he elected, and yeah, so he got officially elected, and they canceled his previous marriage with Catherine. They announced it null. Um, and afterwards, he's going to declare an act of supremacy. This one's a really big one because you're going to see it later on in the absolutist era. Absolute monarchs are going to do this. So what an act of supremacy really was is it acknowledged the king as the supreme head of the Church of England. So he had control over any religious matter. He was the person you would go to about anything regarding religion. So he had control over the religion. And so I have highlighted the people that I thought were important. So I've highlighted Henry VIII already and Anne Boleyn. I have Mary Tudor. Sorry, I cracked my knuckles. But Mary Tudor is going to be Catherine's daughter, and she ruled after Edward, who was like a son that Henry had with another person. He had like 6 marriages after Anne Boleyn, I think. He kept trying until he could get a boy. But he got Edward, and after Edward was Mary, and she tried to bring Catholicism back. I always say that wrong. Like, I don't know why. My mind just go like Catholicism, but it's Catholicism. But anyway, she tries to bring Catholicism back, and she executed Protestants. Like, she killed a lot of people for being Protestants, and that's why she was known as Bloody Mary. Next we have Elizabeth Tudor. I think she's my favorite Tudor, because she walked a middle ground between Protestants and Catholics during her reign. So she was very tolerant, actually. She was very tolerant compared to the other people in regards to religion. And she was Anne Boleyn's daughter. So she was Mary's half-sister. All right, next. Next we have the Counter-Reformation. And so the Counter-Reformation is going to be the Catholic response to the Protestant Reformation. And it's really a Catholic attempt to counteract the success of the Protestant Reformation. So first they're going to have the index of prohibited books, and that's really what it sounds like. It's like a list of books and authors that you're not allowed to read or talk about or write about. So that's going to include works of Thomas More, Erasmus, and people like some of the Renaissance humanists. And they're going to bring back the Papal Inquisition, and they're going to put heretics to death. They're just going to kill anyone they find disagreeing with them. And okay, so this one's really important, the Council of Trent. I mean, if you don't remember the other stuff, remember the Council of Trent. And the Council of Trent was a parliament that was dominated by the papacy. I can't pronounce things. I'm sorry. I can't. If I pronounce anything wrong, I'm sorry. But the Council of Trent was a parliament, and it responded to issues brought up from the Reformation. So what they're going to do is they're going to take some actions to kind of bring back Catholicism back to its old glory. So what they're going to do is they're going to limit simony, the selling of offices, including the selling of indulgences too. So they're not going to completely get rid of it. They're just going to like decrease it. And next, they recognized that poorly educated clergy was a problem that they needed to address. So how they addressed it was that they encouraged higher education. They set a standard for, how educated a member of the church should be. But they're not going to take back anything from the traditional teachings. In fact, they're going to endorse it even further. So this includes the belief that salvation can be obtained from both faith and work. And that sacraments, they're going to reinforce the importance of sacraments and the role of priests. And next, Baroque art. I just put that in because I think it's a fun fact. Well, it might be useful in the exam, but I'm not very sure. But I just like talking about Baroque art because I think it's very pretty. But Baroque art is basically just religious art commissioned by the church, and they're gonna want it everywhere to like reinforce Catholicism, really. And here's an example. There's a picture of Baroque art. I think it's so gorgeous. But yeah, Baroque art is just gonna be religious art. All right, next we have. Wait, I think that's it. Okay, yeah, that's it. Bye bye.